Hello and welcome to Desmond's Garage. I'm Desmond, and today we're going to be wiring up this headlight on my Dodge pickup truck. So this pickup truck, 1951, Dodge B3B, this headlight is not original. This headlight is a modern LED headlight with a couple things going on. High beam, low beam, and this is like an orange thing that's like a turn signal. The truck originally had seal beam halogen, 6-volt positive ground, the electrical system back then. I didn't keep that electrical system for a couple reasons. I wanted something a little more modern, and I also didn't really want to keep old halogen headlights. I'm a big fan of LED headlights. That was the first thing I put on my motorcycle. I think it makes a big difference for visibility. Not that I want to drive this thing at night too much, but you know, when you're restoring an old truck like this, there's the question of, do I want to keep it original? Do I want to kind of upgrade it, make it more interesting, more personal, more cool? I ended up going with the latter route because it's more fun for me. And so I landed on these headlights, which I got from a Chinese site for 50 bucks. And I think I can recommend them. I can't recommend them yet until I try it. But we have a couple things to wire in. It's a little different from the previous light. Again, this is a 12-volt negative ground versus the 6-volt positive ground. High beam, low beam ground, what you'd expect. This turn signal, I think, has a turn signal and a ground wire coming off it. The truck originally had no turn signals. So we'll install those eventually, not today. But I want to run the wires from this light over to the other side to meet up with the other light and then back into the cab so that I can plug them in. At the end of this, we want to have working high beams, working low beams, turn signal to come later. So I'm going to show you the back of this, what our wiring setup is going to look like, and then we will start stripping some wires. So here we are inside the engine, looking at where the wiring is going to come up from the headlight. I've already attached these wires to the back of the headlight, fed them up through the body panels. We'll cut some of this off to length, but right now they're a little longer, and they will mount to a wiring panel here. Originally, they used this thing. This is like before the days of plastic. They had this sort of metal sheet, and then I think this is actually a Bakelite kind of plastic here, insulating these posts from where it would mount to this L panel. This is actually the original L bracket, or bracket that kind of goes in here through the radiator. I just was able to enlarge these holes to fit a kind of slightly larger screw pattern on the modern one. Of course, today we use plastic for these terminal strips because it insulates the electricity, but back in the day they didn't. There was also another piece back here that went between this metal and the bracket. But it fit on just like that, and then wires would come in from the headlight. Again, we just had high beam, low beam, and ground. They fed in through here, and then from this terminal, there was another set of wires that went up and over to the other side, where they met a similar bracket for the other headlight, joined together, and then from there, wires came off going back to the controls in the cab. So obviously we need more than 3 posts for our fancy new headlight. So I ordered this terminal strip. I've already installed the one on the other side. So we're gonna get some screws together, place this in here, and then take our wires, cut them, put little terminals on the end, clip them in, and then make another set of wires to go from the other side up to meet the wires on the other headlight. Got some number 6 screws and lock washers here to fit through the ends. I would like to use something larger than a number 6 screw, but the head of the screw is the only thing that'll fit through this little channel. I tried a number 8 and it doesn't really make its way through. I didn't really feel like enlarging this hole. So we're gonna go with number 6. We have washers and lock washers. This is a truck, it vibrates. It will vibrate loose if we don't use lock washers. So just use 2 of these to bolt it in. It's a little tight here in the back for the nuts, but it could do worse. So now that we have our terminal strip mounted on and tight, I need to cut these wires and add, I don't even know what you call them, ring terminals. They could be ring terminals, they could be other kinds of terminals. We're going to go with ring terminals onto the ends and then screw them in here. So I made this longer than it needed to be. This is not coming directly off the headlight. This is a little wiring harness that plugs into the headlight, into the thing coming off the headlight. So I wasn't sure how long it would be. So I made it longer, better than it being shorter. So, tell you what. First of all, we know we're not going to need this, so I'll just cut all these off for now. Now the question is, do I want to unwrap this tape? Just leave it. I'm kind of looking underneath this back panel to see how much it's kind of hanging down beneath the light. And it's not hanging down that much. So it's not in the way or anything. I may just leave these here. Call that good. Decide which side I want these to go on. Doesn't really matter. I kind of like them to avoid touching this radiator, which will get hot. The vinyl tape might be enough to protect against that. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go for this. Okay, so the next step is, before I cut these to final length, I want to figure out which order I want these wires to go down. It doesn't matter, but I want it to match the other side, because that'll confuse me less. So blue from the top, white with red, then white with green, then yellow with black, white with black, and then red with white. So first is white with red. Just this way. So this is going to come in like such. So this is a cloth wire, cloth covered wire. It's insulated with the regular PTFE plastic inside, stranded wire, 14 gauge? I think it's 14 gauge. Anyway, but it has this covering, which is kind of dirty because it's been sitting here. I installed this months ago, and sitting outside, it's gotten a little filthy in the cloth. It doesn't affect the performance, it just looks kind of crummy. But I wanted to go with cloth covered wiring because it's kind of vintage. It's how they used to do things. And the challenge has been trying to find different colors of cloth to match up with different parts of the circuit. There's lots of different things in the circuit, lots of different circuits here. Do I want to keep the same color for the same line all the way through? care. I mean, I'm going to confuse myself later if I have to redo this. But I don't plan to redo it that often. Hopefully ever. So I'm just trying to maintain some local consistency where possible. So, cut the edge off, strip it down to the wire, twist the wire. Let's get our terminal. I bought a bunch of these heat shrink ring terminals. And there's 2 steps to this. Feed the wire in through the little metal collar in there. We'll crimp it down so it makes a nice mechanical connection onto the wire. You have good contact. And then this piece is heat shrinkable. So I have a lighter here somewhere. Apply a little heat. This will shrink it down onto the wire, giving us some more mechanical stability. Clipped on. Now I just need to heat shrink it down. This, I usually use a lighter. They make heat guns, but I've never bought a heat gun. It didn't seem to be that useful, even though I end up doing a fair amount of heat shrinking with electrical stuff. Lighter works pretty well, but we're gonna have some fun and use this propane torch because it works a lot faster. So let's just fire this thing up here. Gotta watch out because this is like gasoline. So maybe I shouldn't use the propane torch for this one. No, I can just pull it up out of here. All right, let's see. Okay, that's sort of worked. But once I lit it up, I realized it was not a good idea to be doing this around my gas line and gas fuse. So, I'm gonna try this at home. We're just gonna go with this little lighter, which is almost out of gas. It's gonna take a little longer, but it'll get the job done. And it's probably safer. So you can see how that kind of shrunk down, and now it's sealed against this wire, which holds the whole thing in place. So the next step is to unscrew this and then screw this thing in on top of it. But I'm going to wait to do the other ones, put the terminals on the other ones. It's a little easy to work with when it's off. And then I'll put them all in at once. So, now we just get to do the same thing for all the rest of these. There we go. We have these wires in coming from the headlight. Mounted in pretty snugly. So the next step is we need to get some other wires coming off of this side and going over to the terminal block on the driver's side. So we're going to do this a little differently because I really didn't like having to do the heat shrinking and everything in this small area. I could have taken this out, unplugged it from the light, but I ended up not doing it because I'm kind of lazy. But for the next one, I really don't want to use that dinky lighter. I'd rather use my blowtorch. So what I want to do is just measure the distance from here up and over to the other side. And then once I have that, I can go back to my bench, cut the wires all to length, strip them, put the things on the end, tape them up, and then just come back in here with the harness and attach it. And because I won't be working next to gasoline vapors, then I can use my blowtorch to hopefully get the heat shrink done faster. So, what's next? I'm gonna measure this length and then cut a couple other wires to match. Here we are at the other side, on the driver's side. You can see we already have this terminal strip installed. These plugs going to the driver's side headlight. Here's our wiring harness coming in from the passenger side. We are going to attach these in here. So one thing that's different about this side is not only do we have to connect this headlight to the other headlight through the harness, but we also have to run wires this way back into the cab, which the camera is sitting on just behind you. We'll get a shot of that in a second, but this strip is going to be a little crowded with wires coming in from the driver's light and the passenger's light, and then coming in from the rest of the electrical system. So I think what I want to do here is one of these sides is going to get doubled up. So I think what I want to do is connect this harness to this other side and then have the wires coming in from the cab also connect to this other side. So then this is sort of the transmission side, and then this inner piece, this inner side is what comes off to the load, to the lights. And I believe that's how I did it on the other side. Yeah, where the harness comes in on the outside. So we'll keep that same pattern, and these wires match up with the wires on the other side. These heat shrink things were just kind of what I had lying around, so they're different colors. That doesn't matter. The color of the wires doesn't matter either, really, as long as we maintain something consistent. So I think I left these loose. Did I? Wondering if I would come in and reuse that side for the bus wire, but I didn't. So we will take these off. Let's see. Actually, what I want to do is I'm gonna have to make another harness that goes from here over to the bus behind us, and they're both going to line up here. So now that I'm in here, instead of installing these and then taking the screws out and putting the other wire in, I'm going to pause for a minute and then make the next wire harness. Comes back there, and then install these both at once. So just to bring you back here to the other side, here's the cab. Here's all of our electrical wiring. This is our strip where we've just run our wires from the headlights into these posts at the bottom. So now we need to run wires from the top terminals into the rest of the electrical system. So the next step of this is hooking our high beams and low beams into the rest of the circuitry. So here's the general diagram we're working off. We have our 12 volts coming in from the battery, and then we have our light switch, which turns all the lights on and off, and that feeds into a relay. This switches the control circuit in the relay. Our relay goes to ground, and then we also have our source power coming in through a fuse to the power circuit of the relay. So our light switch turns on and off, switches the switching circuit in the relay, which switches this power circuit through to the lights. So when we close our light switch and let power go through, it will always turn on the low beam. It will also send power to our high beam, low beam switch here, which when we step on it will turn on the high beams. I didn't draw it, but also coming off here is our white halo ring, and we will eventually wire in fog lights as well to this. I haven't set up the fog lights yet, but they will all come off of this one circuit. Today we're just going to be dealing with the low beams and the white halo ring. So next step, we should already have the fuse set up and our switch installed. These switches are pretty old-timey. We have a relay bolted into the cab, so we just need to run these wires coming off the relay to the high beams and then to the switch. This might already be set up from a previous day, but then we need to make sure that the wire coming off the high-low switch goes to the high beam. Now, one thing about this high-low switch, originally this did not connect here, so the low beam was not always on. This switch between sorry, high is down there. Switch between low and high, so only one was engaged at a time. This is still common on some headlights. When you turn on the high beam, the low beam will disengage. I'm not worried about that as far as current draw, because these are LED headlights, which draw a lot less current than halogen headlights. So it's fine for both these to be on, for the circuit to draw that much current, because it's not that much current. Because I always want the low beams on, I just disconnected this part from the switch here and then wired it in up there, as you saw originally. So we'll only be using part of the switch. There's also a little indicator light that comes off of this that's back on the dash. We'll run a wire for it. I don't think I have a light bulb set up for it. So, but that's also coming off this switch. So we may run that as well. So this is the diagram that's been erased and scribbled on a little bit. So hopefully you can still see where we're going with it. Pretty straightforward. We just need to remember what's been done before and then commandeer that for our current project. Let's get to it. So to take you inside the cab, now we're looking at the floor of the cab. We have our clutch pedal, our brake, our gas. This one right here is our starter. Push this in and it engages the starter motor on the other side. Our high beam, low beam switch is right here. It's a floor switch, which is kind of fun. It's not like it is on modern cars. These wires are coming in from this switch. I wired these up a previous day along with some possibly helpful markings on these wires. So we're gonna read them and figure out what's going on. But anyway, the wires are coming in from there. We have some relays in the back here waiting to be used. So we will use one for our purposes. Our fuse box is just up there. So we'll grab a fuse. And then the headlight switch is up on the panel up here out of frame. So that's already kind of wired into the dash. So I don't know that I'll be able to get a good shot of that. We'll see, it's a little tight. But at any rate, we're gonna take these wires, figure out which of the leads on the high-low thing they're going to, and wire them up correctly. We're also going to take wires going from, we're going to take a wire from the switch on the panel, the on-off switch, run it to our relay, and then from there run it back out the cab through the firewall here to our low beams and to the high-low switch. And we're going to be ignoring the turn signals, and then back outside we can also jump the white halo ring. So let's see how it goes. So this is probably the least glamorous, I don't know if it's the least glamorous, but it is an unglamorous part of working on this truck. It's getting up in the grill of this dashboard. Trying to get everything plugged in here. It was easier than I thought it'd be. I'll try to get you in there for a picture in a second of what that looks like. But meanwhile, let's get this wire over here to the relay. Double check which relay pin I want. Because I can never remember this. Source 86. Okay. 86 is this one. So okay. Actually, I'm gonna feed this behind. This is the speedometer cable that runs up through here. It's mechanical. Oh, I don't know how much stuff goes behind it. Once I'm done with this wiring, I'm going to clean up these cables, zip tie them together. First, I'm going to get it all plugged in. Make it pretty. Alright. So then, next piece is running from the relay to the low beams, and then I think from the relay through the firewall to the low beams, then I think from there we can run that down to the switch, a low beam switch, and the output from that back to the high beams. So bringing these wires in here earlier, the only one I really need is the indicator light, the yellow one, which will go in the dash somewhere. That's not installed yet, so I guess I don't need these other two wires, and I can pull them back through. So we're going to flip around to the other side of the firewall in the engine bay, pick it up there. So here we are on the other side of the firewall. We've got our terminal posts we saw earlier. These are those wires that we saw coming in from the other side. And then they feed down through here, through a little cable, down to our high-low beam switch. So what's going on here? This is our input, this red wire. That's the power coming in. This middle terminal, which is unused, is supposed to be the output for the low beams. Remember, originally the switch would switch between low or high beams, but we're going to have the low beams on, so we don't need to use that. And then the back is the high output. And coming off that is this orange wire, which is intended to go to the headlights themselves. And then the yellow wire is supposed to go to the little indicator bulb in the dash saying, hey, your high beams are on. So what are we going to do? We have to keep this input wire for sure. We're not going to use the low beam one because it's always going to be on. Coming out of this one, we still want our indicator wire for the bulb we will put in someday. And we definitely need this orange one, which is going to power the high beams. So let's see, let's zoom out a little bit here. So these things, remember, come in to these posts and then from here feed in. Now, I originally wired these all back inside because I thought that's how I might want it to be. I thought I would probably want to run them from the switch into a relay. But now the relay is in front of all the lights. And this switch down there doesn't really need a relay. There were no relays in this originally. They ran all the headlight current through the panel switch, which is pretty dangerous, and not what they do now, because if there was a short, you had all the current that went to the headlights just right at your fingertips. And there was more current then than there is now, because originally it was 6 volts. And because power is voltage times amps, if you have a lower voltage, to get the same amount of power, you need twice the current, twice the amps. So because we've gone from 6 volts to 12 volts, that means we only have half the current flowing through the wires. So it's less dangerous anyway. We still don't want to have that stuff going through our panel switches, which is why we have the relay in the first place. But that, I think, takes a lot of the pressure off of, well, again, it doesn't really take any pressure off the switch would have been fine without one. But I don't need to run a wire back in from the switch to a relay and then back out to the lights. That doesn't really buy us anything. So I'm going to reconfigure this, I think. We're going to keep the input power, of course. We're going to, coming in, we're going to keep this indicator light going back. But this orange wire doesn't need to go inside. This orange wire going to the headlights needs to go up here to the green wire, which runs to our headlights. So we're going to take this orange, disconnect that. I may just take this all apart and rewrap it so the orange isn't going through. Or maybe I'll just snip it here because I don't really feel like unwrapping all of it. And then run a new orange wire from here to there. We also want to run a jumper from this 12 volt input to the low beams, so that's always on. Oops. Yeah, this 12 volt input to the low beams, which are always on. Then we'll run ground over here to ground. And then we can jumper the halo lights over to low as well, so they will turn on. All right, let's get to it. All right, here we are. We have all the lights wired in. Everything's hooked up. We got our fuses, we got our relay going. And it's plugged into the headlights. Our battery is hooked up again. If you're doing electrical, always unhook your battery first. Let's see what happens. I can't tell what happened. I have to go out and see. Nothing happened. Why did nothing happen? Why did nothing happen? Let's see. Oops. That shouldn't matter. What happens if I hit this? Nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Okay, so a couple things could be going on. The most likely thing is that the switch is broken. This is the original switch here. I took it out and cleaned it. It was pretty dirty, but it worked. And all the contacts are inside it. It's a sealed thing, so it should be good. And I tested it at the time, and I got continuity. There's definitely power. And I know the lights worked because I tested them earlier, just running directly from the battery. So now, it could be the switch doesn't work, it could be I wired up the relay incorrectly. So now what we're gonna do is take our multimeter and just test for continuity all the way down. So we'll turn off the power so we don't shock the shit out of ourselves. Okay, so it goes. If things work perfectly the first time, pretty lucky. All right, so let's see.